Good evening. Thank you for joining me for this special event series as part of the American Diabetes Month. Today, I have the privilege of asking Oren Liebermann a few questions about his book, The Insulin Express, One Backpack, Five Continents, and a Diabetes Diagnosis That Changed Everything. And hello, Oren. Thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Sarah, thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege to join you here. It is obviously an incredibly important milestone for people with diabetes, 100 years since the invention or creation or discovery of insulin, however you want to look at it. And it's pretty incredible when you think about it, how long we've known about diabetes, and yet all of the advancements are so recent to us and make me able to do what I do with relative ease and it sort of enjoy life to its fullest.
Thank you. Before we begin with questions from your book, will you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So first of all, I'm coming to you from the Pentagon. This is my office, my CNN office in the Pentagon. That's our entrance door. That monitor that you see right behind me, you can't see it, but there's a seat right there. And when I go live, I sit right in front of it. And that says CNN Pentagon. So that's where I sit live on TV. I'm sitting at my desk. And this is my sort of cabinet here. So if my kids have contributed to some of the decorations here that make it more of a home than just simply an office. Again, my name is Oren Liebermann. I'm lucky enough to be CNN's Pentagon correspondent. Before that, I've been here for about a year. Before that, I was CNN's Jerusalem correspondent for about 5.5, 6 years. And then before that, I worked my way up in local news. Crucially, between US local news and CNN, my wife and I decided to backpack around the world for a year. It was either sort of buy a house, buy a car, have kids, and start a family, or sell everything and travel. So we sold everything and traveled, and this was summer 2013. About halfway through that trip, we were in Nepal. We were teaching English to young Buddhist monks in training. And it was at that point where, having lost a tremendous amount of weight, and even my family members noticing that I looked incredibly thin, we finally went to a doctor and then ended up at a hospital where on Valentine's Day 2014, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 31. Spent a week in 2 different hospitals, 4 nights in Pokhara, which was the city we were in Nepal, and then 2 nights in Kathmandu before I was finally medically cleared to fly home. We were home for about 5 or 6 weeks, right around there. And then we made what I consider the most important decision of my life, and that is the decision to keep traveling. We got back on the road. We went to Thailand. And then we kept going: Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, China, Japan, a bit of South America, and then we finished our trip in Iceland. I firmly believe that it's because of that international travel that CNN was interested in me as an international correspondent. And here I am, did that for 6 years, and then got the opportunity to come here to the Pentagon. And it was after my diagnosis, I thought, you know what, maybe my story is compelling a little bit. Hopefully it can inspire somebody. Hopefully it can make somebody laugh. And that led me to write The Insulin Express.
I'm definitely glad you did. And then you mentioned that you were diagnosed on Valentine's Day. You still travel, I believe, on Valentine's Day. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
So I made it a goal as sort of, I don't know if tribute is the right word, but we'll call it a tribute to diabetes, that every year on the anniversary of my diagnosis, my diaversary, I would try to be on the road. It was easy in Jerusalem because I was already inherently on the road. COVID has made that quite a bit harder to travel. Having little kids has also made that quite a bit harder to just get up and go on Valentine's Day, especially now that they're starting school. But it is still a goal. We were determined to keep traveling, and we have. It worked out generally that we traveled on Valentine's Day. It is hard to keep that every year, but it's nice to always know that as sort of a way to show that I will make my decisions and I will decide what I do with my life. It's nice to have that goal of always being on the road. I've sort of moderated the goal to visiting 2 new countries a year. Again, COVID has still made that hard, but I think we can get back to that goal sooner rather than later.
Do you have any travel plans coming up?
Nothing in the books right now. I've only been in the US for actually less than a year now. I moved back on December 16th, 17th of last year. And bought a house for the first time. So that home ownership has taken up quite a bit of that time. We are determined to get back on the road soon, especially since next year is my 10th anniversary. And we're trying to do something a little more far-flung, if you will.
Absolutely. And you were 31 when diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Do you think being an adult made it easier accepting the diagnosis and making those lifestyle changes, or harder?
Absolutely easier. Um, I have very good friends with type 1 diabetes, and they were diagnosed young. And especially through the teenage years, it can be incredibly difficult. It can be incredibly difficult at any age, but just the pressures of teenage life certainly don't help the situation. Being diagnosed at 31, it was relatively easy to say, okay, I have this new problem I have to figure out and deal with. It was easier, I should say, to cut out sweets and sugary drinks and all of that. It still remains difficult sometimes, and especially with Halloween just a few days ago, my kids kept offering me some of their candy, and I politely told them, no, this isn't going to work. But it has made it easier to sort of cope with all of these new, I don't know if rules, but all this new discipline I have to have in my schedule and in my eating and in my exercising. So I'm in a sense always thankful for that. It has also made it much easier for me to be open about my diagnosis. I don't have any problem talking about this. When people ask about my my blood sugar monitor, I don't know if it's my Freestyle Libre right there. I have no problem talking about it. This month, I'm posting my blood sugars on Twitter, #MyBS, just as a way of kind of getting it out there and hopefully inspiring others to talk about it or ask about it or just get a bit of more education out there.
Absolutely. And having a friend who has type 1 diabetes provided some comfort during your diagnosis. Online, these friendships are called diabuddies. With your experience now managing diabetes, do these friendships still offer you support?
Absolutely. Always. So my friend, my diabetes mentor, was diagnosed when he was 10 years old. And I think he was my third email, if I remember correctly, after I got diagnosed. One was to my family. I think the second was to my wife's family, perhaps. And then the third was directly to this friend, who has been a huge part of helping me every step of the way. We both have our tough days, so we both called each other and ranted at each other and vented at each other once in a while. But it's part of it, and it's incredibly important, I think, to have somebody who's willing to chat and willing to help and kind of gets it and has gotten it for so much longer. And although I don't see him as much as I'd like to, I don't talk to him as much as I'd like to, I consider it incredibly important to have a diabuddy. And through the diabetes world, I've gotten a chance to go to a few diabetes conferences, and there it's wonderful to see the level of support, the level of help, and frankly, the friendships that are formed at these.
And you've traveled all over the world while managing diabetes, even traveling on your own to locations following disasters for your work. Are there any tricks or tips you've gained that you can give to others while traveling with diabetes?
Preparation. It's all about preparation. I try to take twice as much insulin as I need just in case, extra pens in case I lose one, or if somehow one overheats. And my diabetes can get quite large, especially on longer 2 or 3 week trips. Especially I find the prep is much harder in summer when warm temperatures can ruin insulin. So it's a Frio wallet or some way to cool insulin, plus all the extra needles you need, plus all the extra extra glucose tabs and extra everything, really. Actually, I think you can see it. This is what I have with me standard, which has not only my insulin. Sorry, this is recharging right now, my Freestyle Libre, extra needles in case I need to use my my older blood sugar monitor. That's here as well. All of this is always with me. Glucose. So preparation. I don't think there's anywhere you can't go just because of diabetes. It's just a matter of the prep work, some of which can be quite extensive, but I've never felt I can't go there, I can't do that because of diabetes.
And then in your book, you described going to Poland and how you expected it to be snowing there no matter what season, because pictures had always shown Poland covered in snow. Reading about this surprise made me wonder, did having diabetes yourself come with any similar surprises?
All the time. I mean, look, first, the diagnosis itself was surprising in an absolutely terrifying way. And frankly, it took me a couple days to get over the initial shock, and then a few weeks to sort of start learning. But there are still surprises. Just in terms of insulin, and your body's reaction to it. How much does it affect blood sugar? That depends on what you ate, of course, and it depends on your level of exercise in recent days. And none of this is fixed. And that's probably one of the most frustrating and difficult things, right? There isn't one solution for all of us. There is a million solutions for each of us, and it's making all of those work together. Sometimes it works great, and you look at your blood sugar numbers, and they're great for an entire day, and that's a good feeling. And sometimes everything's out of whack, and it makes absolutely no sense. But it is what it is. I've had the privilege of speaking to younger groups with type 1 diabetes, and I tell them, look, it doesn't require perfection. You don't have to nail 80 to 120, but it does require you to keep trying. You can't give up. But you do the homework. If it's high, you adjust. If it's low, you adjust. It can be frustrating, especially when it takes multiple adjustments. But at the end of the day, it is just an adjustment. And even if I've been equally frustrated as so many others, it is just an adjustment. And then I get on to doing what I want to do.
And you mentioned teaching your two nieces how to make banana bread. Are you still able to enjoy eating banana bread yourself? And if not, what treats do you still indulge in?
I do still eat banana bread once in a while. Most of the time I make it for my kids. I generally eat whatever I want. I still eat sweets, but I limit it, right? I won't eat sweets, for example, during the week. I won't generally have a drink during the week. I'll do that on weekends. So I try to be very careful about what I eat and very picky in terms of the quantity, right? I'm not going to eat a whole cake, but if I've decided that Friday night I'm having a piece of cake, then Friday night I'm having a piece of cake. People have asked me, like, have you thought about going to sugar-free ice cream? No, I haven't. If I'm going to eat ice cream, it's going to have sugar in it, and it's going to be delicious, and it's going to be mint chocolate chip. So it's the same things I always enjoyed. I just have to be more careful about the quantity and what I eat. It felt silly the first time I actually measured out a cup and a half of ice cream so I could get the number of carbs right. And eventually you do that, and then you can start eyeballing it. And there's a bit of a give and take. You certainly make mistakes eyeballing things, but you get used to it and it becomes part of the process. The funny part for me, at least, about diabetes is I eat better, I exercise more, I'm more conscious of my lifestyle than I ever was before. I am healthier in many ways than I was before. I just happen to have diabetes.
And you mentioned before about Halloween and that your kids were trying to give you Halloween candy. Have they been pretty understanding about the restrictions you have?
Somewhat. So they're 3.5 and 5.5. I'm not going to hit them with this all at once, but especially with my 5.5, I've taught her a bit more. At some point, I think, sort of statistically speaking, she will run into a friend who will have type 1 diabetes. So I'd like her to be a bit more understanding of it than other students. I talk to them a bit. They're always curious. For some reason, they're always obsessed with the idea that shots hurt. So when they see me take a shot, they always ask, does it hurt? Just a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. So I'm honest with them and I tell them, look, no, it doesn't hurt. You get used to it real quick when you're doing it that many times a day. And I don't have a pump. I do multiple daily injections. But I try to explain to them as much as I can. My 3.5-year-old son loves the sound of the beeping that the Freestyle Libre sensor makes. So he presses the buttons and he hasn't broken it yet, thank God. But I try to keep it fun with them, but also educational, depending on what I think they can understand about diabetes.
They sound adorable. There are some pictures in your book of your travels, and my favorite is the one of you in Peru. You're doing a Zen pose, and then you have your diabetes supplies in each hand, and then Machu Picchu is just in the background. Of all the places you've traveled, do you have a favorite?
So that was a very important picture for me. That was at Huayna Picchu, which is the mountain that overlooks Machu Picchu. And that was the first hike, the first real big outdoor excursion for me since my diagnosis. Right before I was diagnosed, we had hiked in Nepal in the Himalayas, and that hike almost killed me. I was diagnosed shortly thereafter, and I was in rough shape. That hike had a number of sort of crazy similarities to the Machu Picchu hike. The altitude was almost exactly the same. The length of the hike. It ended up raining on the third day of both hikes. But that was the first hike where I really said, okay, we're doing this. We're going to test out if I can do outdoors, sort of strenuous outdoor activity over multiple days with diabetes. So when we got to the top of that hike, it was such a wonderful feeling. And I've encouraged everybody to go when it's, again, soon possible to travel again, I hope. But I'll say that my top 3 favorite locations, the first one was Ireland. It is the greenest and most beautiful place I've ever seen. And then China and Thailand. I was in China and we had a couple of friends who were there. One was my friend, one was my wife's friend. And we did get 2 weeks of absolutely beautiful weather there, which was quite incredible. And it made it easier that people showed us around because it can be quite difficult to manage there if you don't have a local guide. The food was fantastic. Seeing friends was fantastic. And an immersion in an entirely different culture. And then Thailand, I recommend to everybody. An incredibly easy place to get around as a Westerner or as an American. Incredible food, incredibly spicy food at that. And the things to see there are simply amazing. If you have the time to get to the other side of the world, frankly, I would put that very high on the list. And I know it can be tough to get there, but once you get there, it is an incredibly affordable place.
I'll have to bucket list both China and Thailand, but I have had the chance to go to Ireland, and the green is just something you never see anywhere else.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much for sharing with us today and in your book. Is there anything else you would like to share?
When it comes to diabetes, I said one of my big pieces of advice is it doesn't require perfection. It requires always doing your homework. And I try to remind myself of that sometimes as well. It can be frustrating to suddenly see a number in the 200s or higher, or suddenly you're dropping into the 60s, 50s or below. But again, I try to remind myself to make the adjustment and then keep on going. I don't feel limited in any way. I try to remind not only myself of that, but I tell other people that as well. I pretty much do what I want. I'm lucky enough in my spare time to be a private pilot. Sure, diabetes threw a bit of a wrench into that because of the medical clearances needed for flying, but I got back into that as well when I moved back to the US a year ago. So it really I don't view it as a limiting factor. And that's what I try to get across in the Insulin Express. It's there. I take care of it. I quote unquote, do the homework, but that's it. And then I do whatever I want.
And then before I began reading your book myself, I did anticipate that diagnosis story could be entertaining, but you managed to include humor even when events were frightening. And I found myself laughing just out loud while reading it. With your vivid descriptions, I can imagine everything. It was the sunrise on top of Masada and the humidity in Bangkok. And so I want to thank you for not just sharing that you did in your story, but bringing a good sense of humor through it all. And then thank you for being here with us today.
Of course, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Bye.
Take care.